tell us what he did. And Herman Baca, who was part
Who
of
was a community activist and part of the, I don't want to say it
civil,
wrong.
part
Yeah,
of the
migrant civil workers movement. I don't want to say it wrong.
yeah, no, definitely gonna get it right. Say it
Okay.
wrong.
Okay.
The migrant workers civil rights movement.
Okay.
Okay.
So he was a community activist and part of the migrant workers civil rights movement.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
All right.
This is informal, so this
Yeah.
is pretty much for us to
Okay.
label it. Yeah.
Cut and
Okay.
paste.
No cut and paste here. Okay. Okay, Lena, go ahead.
Okay. Can I start off about how did you come to San Diego?
I'm originally from a little town in New Mexico called Los Lentes. Lentes in Spanish means glasses.
Okay.
But it wasn't named after glasses, it was named after a Native American. And my family has been in New Mexico since 1600.
Wow.
So we came to San Diego, my family, probably in around 1951. My dad came here because seeking employment, and then he brought the family. I probably came here around 1954, and my father never left. It's a little bit like all of the migrants that come from Mexico in search of work, that their famous saying is they're always going to go back to their little ranch, and they never leave. They never leave because, the families grow, they get married, they have grandchildren and what have you. So basically that's what happened. But we came here around 1954. I went to Choya School there on Market Street. Around 55, 56, we moved to National City here, Old Town National City. I went to Kimball School. I went to National City Junior High, Sweetwater High School.
Okay.
And then back in those days, there wasn't too many choices that you had as far as what you were going to do. You were either after you got out of school or before you got out of school, because many people never graduated. You either were going to go into the service, you were going to go into construction, or you were going to go to the big house, the prison system. So those was basically the alternatives that were open to the Chicano community back in the 1950s.
So what were some of the issues or forms of discrimination that were facing Mexican Americans during that time?
Basically the same issues, same problems that the Afro-American community has always suffered. Racism, institutionalized racism, institutionalized discrimination in all facets, in all of the institutions of American society. I remember seeing signs throughout the Southwest, no Mexicans, no ants, and no dogs allowed in restaurants, hotels, motels, and what have you. So right here where we're at today, this used to be an exclusive white area. And if we came here, the police would stop us in 5-10 minutes, and they wouldn't ask us, "What are you doing here?" They would say, "Get back over to the west side," where the Mexican barrio where we lived at was at. So it was basically the same issues that the Afro-American community was facing.
What were some of the connections between the African American community and the Mexican American community?
Well, you have to remember that when I first got involved, it was 1968. At the time, the civil rights movement was going hot and heavy. The anti-Vietnam War movement was going on. The youth movement, the women's movement, the gay movement, the Native American movement. So there was a lot of activism. There was a lot of challenging of the system here in this country. So there was parallels. Everyone was a victim of some of the abuses of the system. And I remember first getting involved picketing with Afro-Americans against the issues that they were confronting. Mm-hmm. And out of that experience, most of us that got involved, we thought we were helping, which we probably were, but in the process, we found out we were basically in the same boat with the same problems, and if not even more problems, especially with the large number of Chicanos who resided here in the Southwest. So those were the things that brought us together, common issues, common problems. Mm-hmm. So that's how we got involved on common ground or common issues and problems.
Mm-hmm. So how have you seen the ideas of opportunity, bias, segregation, and equality develop over time?
Well, I don't know if they have developed because they were here. They have been here historically since the founding of this country in one manner or another. Let's not forget that the treatment of the Native Americans, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. The enslavement of Afro-Americans, and of course the conquest of the Chicano people here in the Southwest. Mm-hmm. And so it hasn't developed. I think it has always existed, and it continues to exist. Mm-hmm. The struggle is far from over. So we have to remember that. I always tell young people when I speak to them that without struggle, there is no progress. Mm-hmm. And we continue to face struggles in different ways than back then. It was more overt. In 2014, it's more covert, but it's just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah. What are some of the things that we can do, my generation specifically, coming up to make things better?
I always tell, again, young people that you can never get a solution to a problem unless you know what the problem is. And the only way you can know what the problem is by knowing history. You have to understand the struggles that have been fought in order to confront the issues and problems that you as a new generation face and are going to continue to face. Mm-hmm. So there's opportunities, but power gives opportunities, and power can take away opportunities. After the Civil War and the so-called freeing of the Afro-American slaves, there were senators in the Deep South. There was congressmen. And within probably not even a generation, 20 years, all of that was taken, and Jim Crow segregation that lasted for the next 100 years came into being. So we have to be very, very cognizant of that the system, the powerful, those that have power, that control the system, they have many options. People of color, poor people have few, if any, options. Those options have to be created. They have to be built. So that's what young people have to keep in mind. Give you an example. When I first started in 1968, the Chicano community in the United States numbered, according to the U.S. Census, 7 million. Today in 2014, we are 55 million. According to the U.S. Census, by the year 2050, we're going to be 134 million. But we have a situation in our community that our historical knowledge to carry on that struggle, the education of our people has not kept pace with that massive increase of population that has given us the political mass to create power. But you cannot create power unless you have educated people. And I don't mean just going to Harvard or Princeton or San Diego State. I mean that our people, and all people really, that have suffered historical injustices have to be educated. And by that I mean they have to understand their history, their language, and their culture. And if you look at our historical conditions, we have been our history has been taken away. Our culture has been taken away. And so, and of course our language has been taken away. So all of those things, comprise what? Education. One of the big problems with Afro-Americans is they cannot communicate with their ancestors, who also struggle, who also made it possible for them to be here. In our community, very, very few people understand the history of what happened here, how we got in this situation. So people have to be educated, they have to be politicized. And by politicized, I don't mean running for public office. I mean reading a book, reading a newspaper, reading a journal, understanding who sits in those positions of power that make the laws, that make the curriculum for our children in the schools and what have you. That's what I mean by politicized. And of course, the old saying is very, very true that you have to be organized. But the old saying is one person cannot fight City Hall, which is true. You need organized people, because politics is a game of competing interest. It's not a game of individuals. Individuals are individuals. Some can make it, some ain't gonna make it, so on and so forth. But as a group that has been subjected to institutional racism or discrimination, you need power. And the only people that can bring about power is organized people. So those things have to happen, and youth have to understand that those are goals that have not been attained to in 2014. That's why we still see massive unemployment in the Afro-American community, 16%. That's why you still see police brutality. That's why you still see housing issues. That's why you still see once in a while races getting out of their cages like that bunker in Nevada. You know, I mean, in all fairness, I always say at least he's honest. How many others that we don't know think the same way? And you see it in policies, and you see it in the treatment, the different treatments. And it doesn't matter if we have politicians. As long as the base is weak, then those individuals have to go to the strong, you know, and ignore the weak.
Lena, having to talk about what I think what we really need to having to talk about the migrant workers movement, the Mexican workers that came over working in the agricultural fields. That's part of the history that we don't know. What can you tell us? What was that like? What was that? I mean, because it led to the Chavez forming the union and also doing the
You're really talking about the Chicano movement.
the Chicano movement.
Yeah,
we want
because the immigrant rights movement came out of the Chicano movement. The Chicano movement was the Mexican Americans' civil rights movement. You know, out of that came Cesar Chavez. Out of that came Bert Corona. Out of that came Reyes Lopez Tejerina, Corky Gonzalez, people like Abe Tapia. You know, those were the people that confronted the system. And I think it's important for young people to understand that you have electoral politics. You see with Obama, you see with Congress people, you see with mayors and what have you. Electoral politics is a game of scratch my back, I scratched your back, get along to go along. And then you have movement politics. And a movement sees that there's inequities, institutionalized inequities, in that the playing field is not level. And that the rules and the laws and the attitudes have to be changed. And that means you have to create power. You have to deal with the people that are being subjected to that institutionalized racism or discriminations or the issues and problems. So the Chicano movement, I got involved with the Chicano movement in 1968. And like I said, it was due to all of the other movements, especially the Afro-American movement, that we owe a lot to for raising the issues, raising the consciousness of people and say, hey, we also have a lot of problems. How come we don't have any politicians? How come we don't have any school principals? How come we don't have any counselors? How come our children are not in the colleges? Those type of issues and problems, like they say, you don't know what you don't know. You have to be taught. That's why we have mothers and fathers and grandmas and grandfathers, to teach us what is right and what is wrong. So I got involved and, at the beginning, remember, you don't know what you don't know. So you come in like green, naive, conditioned, because you went to school and they taught you certain things. Hey, George Washington is the father of your country. And in the back of your head, you're saying, how come he don't look like me? He don't look like anybody I know around me.
Yeah.
But you just accepted it. You never were taught anything about yourself. I remember what I did know. I lived in this little town, like I stated, Los Lentes, New Mexico. And I remember going to school. The little town was like 95 or 98% persons of Mexican ancestry. Everyone spoke Spanish. But when we went to school, no, you can't speak Spanish. I remember in the third grade, me and a friend were speaking. We were in line, we were speaking Spanish, and all of a sudden I felt a hand across my face, teacher had slapped me, and I remember telling me, "Don't you be speaking Spanish on the school grounds."
Wow.
And I says, didn't make no sense to me, but I was just a little kid, scared and frightened. So those sort of things, are things that you don't know. So when I got involved, I was the president of an organization called MAPA, the Mexican American Political Association. When we got involved, we said, well, if we have to get involved with the people that are suffering the abuses of this racism, discrimination, which is our community. So we decided at the time that we would get involved politically. So, well, what's wrong with, ain't no big deal registering to vote or running candidates, isn't that what it's all about? So we got involved with that, thinking that all we had to do was register some people, and then we were going to get some candidates, and they were going to take care of all the problems, and we were going to go home and go drink beer, and that was it. Well, if our issues, started way, way back, and now I'm talking history, in 1519, when the Spanish came to Mexico and, conquered the Aztecs and created the mestizos, us, if we then obviously just registering some people and running some candidates is not going to do away with that historical problem. Mm-hmm. So out of that, came a lot of other issues. We'd go out and register people, and people start complaining about their kids being treated unfairly in the school. In the schools, there not being any Mexican American or Chicano teachers, principals, the people that make the spend the money, the trustees not being on and on, or people talking about, they stopped my welfare payments, and then we got started to hear a lot about my aunt, my brother, got deported by the immigration, and we would ask people, well, you want to register to vote? No, my wife's getting her papers. Her mother doesn't have any papers, and we don't want to draw any attention to us. So what is this issue? And I always remember saying, how did we get here? Well, how did all these problems get here? I says, those other people don't seem to be having, white people don't seem to be having all this kind of problems, and I thought we were all Americans, what happened here? And back then, there was very little, if anything, about our history here in the Southwest. As a matter of fact, back in the 60s, we were known as the forgotten. We were the silent, the invisible minority. We didn't even exist, to the politicians, to the policymakers, to the institutions. Mm-hmm. So there was very, very little that you could go back, and that's why I always say history is so important. You have to understand what other people did and left you to try to resolve those issues and problems that you now are confronting you, and that you are now facing, your generation or what have you, or your community. So there was very, very little. As a matter of fact, I always remember that there was one book that spoke about Mexican American history, and that was a book called North from Mexico. It was written by an author named Carrie McWilliams. It wasn't a person of Mexican ancestry, you know. It was an Anglo. And so, you know, all of the issues, we had to educate ourselves and try to find the reasons as to why they were in our community, causing all this turmoil or all this conflict, you know, within our people that was impeding them from, you know, progressing or solving their issues and their problems. So, out of the Chicano movement, like I said, came an education. Even the word Chicano. I remember when I came here from New Mexico, believe it or not, I had never seen an Afro-American, you know. And I remember my father, I was like around the 3rd grade, 4th grade, and we lived on Market Street. And believe it or not, Market Street back then was predominantly white. Yeah, believe it or not. And I remember my father got us in a room the night before going to school, and he says, tomorrow you're going to see colored people. And in my mind, and because back then you didn't ask questions, you know, you just listened. In my mind, I said, colored people, are they black? Are they blue? Are they purple? Or what color are they? He says, and whatever you do, don't call them black. Call them Negroes or colored. So, okay. And whatever you do, do not use the N-word. What's the N-word? You know, and you know, I never had heard. I mean, sure enough, the next day I went and I saw colored people, but they were all black. They weren't purple. They weren't red. They weren't orange. You know, so all of those things. You know, like I said, we had to learn. You know, we had to educate ourselves, and it was the same thing in our community. This immigration issue, which, excuse me, which now, outside of the economy and terrorism, is the foremost political, social, and economic issue in this country. The so-called illegal alien issue. Even there was illegal aliens. I said, what are they, from Mars or something? You know, what are they talking about? It was a little bit like that incident where I got slapped. What are they talking about, you know? So, you know, there's a whole bunch of us here, you know, and there's a whole bunch of us that never even been to Mexico. What are they talking about, you know? And it's something that's affecting us. So the immigration issue, I remember, was a non-issue back in the early 70s. And most of the activists, believe it or not, were totally unaware of how this issue affected our community. And I got involved with the issue, of course, being from San Diego. Mexico's only 15 miles away. That is the busiest border crossing in the world. So geographically, I was one of the reasons geography, I guess, played a big role, because back then the issue was starting to really affect a lot of people.
Right.
And my mentor, the head of the Mexican-American Political Association, Bert Corona, who was a political activist that started back in the 30s, 1935. I remember around 1971, 72, we were at the time, we had gone from MAPA, the Mexican American Political Association, like I said, electoral politics, saying that, hey, this game wasn't created for us. The rules are all slanted. The playing field is not level. We went from MAPA to a third political called La Raza Unida Party, which was aimed specifically at, persons of Mexican ancestry. See, once again, historical parallels between the Afro-American and the Chicano community. The Mississippi Freedom Party that the Democratic Party refused to seat back in when Johnson was president.
Now, one thing I want to tell you about Mr. Baca. Mr. Baca is a pioneer, true pioneer. He's got a lot of information. So if you want to get the answers that you need to get to, don't be afraid to interrupt.
Yeah, ask.
Okay.
Just jump right on in there, because he will talk. He's got a lot of information. This is why we want to come to people like him, because he'll give you what you need, and he'll tell you what you think you don't need, but it's just as important. So to get through your questions, don't be afraid to jump in and ask your questions and everything like that.
Okay.
Okay. This is a learning process for all of us, and so she'll let you talk. You'll go and you'll go and you'll go.
Lena,
but then we won't get to the point of what we really want to get to.
Yeah.
So what are your next questions now? I mean, what are the questions that you have?
Okay.
For Mr. Baca?
I just wanted to know some of the organizations that you were a part of.
Okay.
And what's your relationship with Mr. Chavez?
Okay, I'll get to that right now, okay, because I think since we're talking about the so-called illegal alien issue, it's important that people get a background of what happened in that community where the issue came from. So we're working for, and by the way, I got an old saying, never give an activist a microphone, okay, because you'll never get him off. But anyway, so Bert Corona was a national organizer for La Raza Unida Party. And around 72, he came to my office, which was around 15 blocks south from here. And after exchanging pleasant, the greetings of the night, Bert was coming from somewhere, and like that was his MO. He would just kind of parachute in from somewhere. And he says, Herman, can I talk to you? When we had two offices, we had Aztec Printing, which you are now sitting in, and we had a little social service building called Casa Justicia that dealt with immigrants and other people's problems in the community. And he said, can I talk to you next door or by yourself? So we went over there, and he says, Herman, he says, we have to get on this immigration issue. I never even heard of immigration, and I said, you don't know what you don't know. So listen to your elders. And in my mind, it says, what is Bert smoking? What is it? And I says, what does that got to do with us? I says, Bert, we're working on this newsletter for La Raza Unida, and you're the national organizer. He said, no. He says, we got to get on this issue because this is an issue. Remember, this is 1972 or so. This is an issue that's going to be with us until the year 2000. So I had been involved a grand total of probably 2 or 3 years compared to his 35 years. He was my mentor and he was my elder. So I just listened. And sure enough, that issue went from a little anthill to a Mount Everest of an issue, where the Pope is talking about, where the President is talking about, where the United Nations is talking about, where the Congress is talking about, where people, right-wingers, racists, are talking about it, and so on and so forth. And even our own community now is talking about it. So that issue is very, very, to me, is systematically speaking, is very, very parallel to slavery. You know, you have a group of people that they weren't brought here in boats. They're just right 15 miles from here. Brought here by a very powerful economic and political interest. Why? Because for cheap labor. And once again, historically speaking, we have to remember that this country is an attic. This system is an attic. No one can deny that this country is addicted to drugs. Nobody. Nobody can deny that this country is addicted to pornography or free or cheap labor. Ever since they brought the first Afro-American slaves to West Virginia, I think it was 1619. Since that time, they have needed their fix for free or cheap labor. They've done it with Native Americans, they've done it with Chinese who built a railroad, they've done it with Filipinos that worked the field. They've even done it with their own people. The Irish and the Okies from the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. They have exploited them too. They have a short memory, but white people were also exploited. And of course, they've been doing it to Mexicans since the end of the U.S.-Mexico War of 1850. So, you know, you have people that have been brought here, enticed here, or whatever, however you want to see it. And they, like slaves, have no rights, no standing in any of the institutions. So they can do whatever they want with them, and it's for the labor. So really what we're talking about is not immigration, because it's not immigration. It's a labor issue. So that's the so-called immigration issue. But you ask me organizations, organizations are just vehicles that try to address the issues and problems in our community. I personally have been involved with a lot of organizations. You try this, you try that, you see if this works or that works. Like I said, I started out with MAPA, the Mexican American Political Association. I got involved with the La Raza Unida political party that is, whether people want to admit it or not, is responsible for most of the so-called Hispanics and Herpanics. See, there again, back to historical parallels. Negroes, colored, blacks, Afro-Americans. We have gone from wetbacks, the derogatory terms, to Latinos, you know, which is, in my book, is ludicrous. I mean, you know, is there a Latin country anywhere? I don't know where I know there's a Latin mass. You know, I didn't know we were a mass, you know. So we went for Latin. And the reasons, you know, were to try to get away from that no Mexicans, ants, or dogs allowed, you know, by certain people that had gotten a little bit upward mobility. So you had terms of Latinos, and then you had Mexican Americans. That's another misnomer. America is really a continent. You got North America, you got Central America, you got South America. So if you want to talk about Mexican Americans, yeah, they're 15 miles down the road, you know. Those are the real Mexican Americans. But that term came out of World War II, because in Texas, segregation there for persons of Mexican ancestry was just as bad as it was for Afro-Americans in Mississippi. You know, the lynchings and everything, you know, the whole package. So, and then from Mexican American, and this were system-imposed identification terms. From there, it went to Chicano. And Chicano really was a political term, just like black was. you know, "Hey, we're going to name ourselves, not you." See, when we used to go to school, you know, we were named, baptized, say Jorge, and then we go to school, and that afternoon, we would come out George. Nobody would ask our parents. Nobody would ask our godparents. Nobody would even ask us, you know. So it was a means of control, of defining. So Chicano was a reaction to all of that history, that things were no longer going to be the same and things were going to be changed. And then, of course, for every action, there's a reaction. Then you got Hispanic. And once again, we're back to someone defining who or what you are. Think about it. Hispanic. I always jokingly say, "Oh, you're Hispanic, eh? Is there a her panic?" I said, "We don't want to be sexist now, because there's a he's, there got to be a her." I says, but think about it, just a term. A person of Mexican ancestry is a person that came out of the intermarriage of the Spanish and the Native American. Now, where in that word is our Indian mother? We going to deny our mother? Is that what it takes to be included in this society? Huh? So, yeah, or more jokingly, is like the comedian George Lopez. They asked him, "Do you like being called Hispanic?" And he said, "I don't like being called any word with a word panic in it." So questions of identification, you know, historical, you know, destruction, cultural destruction, all those things. But the organizations, like I said, now you asked me when I first met Cesar Chavez. I first, in around 1974, I think, 73, there was a strike, a farm workers strike, right down here in Imperial Beach. And the farm workers called me up, the striking farm workers, because I was head of the Mexican American Political Association, and to ask for help. I said, "Well, what can we do? We're not farm workers." He said, "No, we need whatever kind of help you can give us, moral support, food, clothing, what have you." So anyway, I got involved in trying to help them out and, you know, going down there. So after a period of time, the Farm Workers Union, the United Farm Workers that Cesar Chavez was leading, they got involved, and Cesar came down to San Isidro. And I met him there, hi and bye kind of thing, and I just listened on to the meeting that was at the leader of the local farm workers' home. Before that, I had been involved with the Boycott Grapes campaign that, you know, inspired and got a lot of us involved, you know, in the community and in the political scene. So we used to picket. There used to be a Safeway right down, just a block down, and we used to picket there, you know. So I met Cesar there, and then I met him at a Christ the King church over on Imperial. To this day, I don't know what we were doing there. That picture over there that you see in the newspaper, it was on Prop 14, which was a statewide initiative that the farm workers had launched. We had a meeting, gathering, demonstration back then, and then there was a police shooting here in, I think, 76, and I met with Cesar in Point Lomas somehow. I don't know how we got together there either, but we did. And I always remember him telling me that, well, you know, we were recalling the mayor and city council here in National City over the shooting because they, you know, because of the police brutality that was going on. And I remember him telling me, he says, well, what's the major industry in National City? I said, it's the mile of cars. He says, well, why don't you boycott the mile of cars? You know, so, and the last time that I remember seeing him must have been in the 80s. I was going to a conference in San Antonio, Texas, and I was walking through the airport and I heard somebody yell out, "Huron!" And it was Cesar and his bodyguard. That his bodyguard was from here, from San Diego. So we talked, and you know, said, "Hey, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to a conference." I said, "Where are you guys going?" I mean, "Where are you guys coming from?" "We're coming from a conference." I said, "Okay, goodbye." Da, 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 da. So that was the last time that I saw him. You know. So I think the important thing about Cesar, you know, was besides him getting most of my generation involved in their communities in the political and you know arena, was that, like I said, we were the forgotten, the silent, the invisible minority. We didn't exist. You know, Cesar was, you know, gave Chicanos here in this country an identification. Nationally and even internationally, people started saying, "Who are these people?" You know, what's their history? What's their issues? What's their problems? So, you know, to me, that's one of his, you know, big contributions to the history of our people here in this country.
What was your greatest achievement, or what are you most proud of that you did particularly in the movement?
Well, I think.
This will be the last question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's something that history is going to have to answer. It's not for me to answer, you know. The problem is still here. The struggle is still here, you know. And if I did my part, you know, I'm thankful for being able to do that. And but as far as you know, what the accomplishments or what this or what that, I think history will have to answer that.
Okay. What are some, just maybe an example of one?
Well, I would say, you know, trying to raise the social and political consciousness of our people, understanding that you cannot get a solution if you don't know what the problem is, and you cannot know what the problem is unless you understand history. You know, concepts are very, very important to people. You know, they're extremely important. You know, without concepts, you're lost. You know, Malcolm X once made a statement that a people without a history is like a tree without roots, dead. And anybody can do anything with that tree that they want. And it's very, that concept is very, very important. I've always carried it with me. You know, I've always carried it with me because it's very, very true. It's very, very true. If you don't know, you don't know. And anybody that does know can use you, misuse you, and abuse you. So I think if, and I can't say me, I have to say we, because it's a movement, it's a struggle. Many people are involved. Some are named, most are not named. But like I said, I don't think anybody can say I did this or I did that. You know, no, we did this or we did that. You know, and you go through peaks and valleys. You know, because people get complacent, people get comfortable, people get, you know, tired, people get sleepy, and a whole host of other things. That is until the wolf comes around again and then start looking for solutions. So, like,
Is there anything else? Is there anything else you wanted me to get in? Just
No, that was pretty much, he had some pretty good things to say about, so when you're going back and you're looking through it, you'll hear some of the things that you need to hear, because we're gonna cover what, you cover quite a lot there, there's a lot of things in there that we're gonna use.
let's get him on camera before the camera runs out. We get him on camera saying he gives us the rights to his words.
Oh, yeah, you know, I forgot the picture thing, I forgot my little camera. Hey, come on in.
¿qué pasó? ¿Puede regresar? Porque están como media hora, por favor.
¿Media hora?
Sí. Que gracias,
Okay, this is, we didn't bring the, you know, the press releases that we need, to say it's okay for us to use your likeness.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you that question, you just respond.
Okay.
Yes, this is what we call an electronic one.
Okay.
And it works too. So do you give us permission to use